Hey everybody, welcome to another sort of how I would do it Patreon video. Sorry I haven't been posting so much. I have been crazy busy while I was in New Zealand trying to wrap up an edit and delivering it to the network and applying notes, and also seeing some family while I was over there. It was a crazy busy time. But here I am back in my home office, and I thought that a good topic to sort of talk about would be scripting macros. And that's because I've helped out a couple of you on the Patreon channel with macros and some other stuff where I think macros would have came in really handy. If you haven't already seen the video that I've done on this on the YouTube channel, I would recommend it. I'll have a link to it in this post somewhere below. It is one of my earlier videos, so it might not be the most slick or fast moving, but the information's good. It is a long one, but it'll go through 3 different levels of macros, from a very simple one all the way through to one that's going to automatically export multiple different Avid presets, and it is a sort of set and forget. Hit one button and it'll export an AF, an H.264, and I can't remember what the third one was. I think a WAV file. And yeah, so you can check that out just for like an overview of macros and scripting, and then come back here. But for this video, I wanted to talk about a few little gotchas, a few little things that I've learned just through trial and error of making these macros, things to watch out for, that are just sort of good to know and can help your macros reliably always work on different machines. So let's get started. So in case you haven't seen that YouTube video and you want to start here, a quick rundown of what I mean by scripting and macros here, I'll use those two terms interchangeably throughout the video, is just scripting a series of keystrokes or input commands to the computer to run in a preset order. You can get a lot more complex about it by adding in variables and adding in submenus and pop-ups, and if this happens then do this, but the most simplistic explanation of it is you just script a number of commands, and then when I hit a hotkey or when any sort of trigger happens, run these commands. Now this can save you a lot of time in something like Avid Media Composer, even just scripting together a few basic keystrokes. So for example, I've got a really simple one up here called get current timecode. And what this does is that if I'm on the timeline, I'll put everything up on this window here and bring up my bins. Then say I want to grab this timecode, so 5:47:23, and I want to input that into a spreadsheet somewhere. I can hit my trigger, and it's now copied it to my clipboard. Now all that's actually doing, so I can do it with another timecode here, and I'll do it manually. Let's go and mark in, and then hitting 2 for find bin, hitting tab twice, and then Command C to copy, and then it's ready to paste somewhere else. Really simple one, but it saves you a lot of time when you need to quickly paste a timecode or something like that. I also do this for when I'm subclipping. So if you've seen my video on syncing, I like to create my sync maps. And then here's one that I've already done. I'm just loading it back up. And say I've checked the sync. I know it's all in sync and it's ready to go. I can hit my macro here, and it's grabbed it and subclipped it out. Now all this macro is actually doing is it's going deselect all tracks, re-enable V1, hit T to mark, and then enable A1, and then subclip. Now it's a very simple series of commands, but if it's one that you're having to input a lot, and with my method of syncing, I like to go through and do it one at a time because it lets you check the clips as you're syncing them. This can save you a lot of time if you're not having to hit those commands yourself. But in the case of this one, and with a lot of the others, it's not just about saving time. It's also about, removing the need for human error. When I can't speak for everyone else, but I know for myself, if I'm doing the exact same task, something like this, syncing, with your subclipping just V1 and A1, and you're doing it again, and say there's, multiple sync maps because they've had 3-camera shoot or something like that, the more you do it, then the more liable you are to make a mistake, just through sheer boredom, because it happens. Whereas if you've scripted it, then the computer's going to do it the exact same way every single time, guaranteed. So yeah, that's sort of just another good reason to try macros and scripting, is just removing the need for human error. That's why I like to have it for exports, and for subclipping. Anywhere where I've made a mistake in the past at any point, even if it's not like one that's cost me anything, usually just like, say, if I'm syncing, I've accidentally selected like the wrong audio tracks and subclipped it out. Noticed it later, it's a quick fix. But still, it's a quick fix that wouldn't have been necessary if I'd just done it right the first time. And so whenever I notice stuff like that, then I'll go back and I'll create a macro and a script for it. And I've got a page on my Stream Deck just for triggering all of these scripts. Right, now that's enough of me trying to give you the sales pitch on scripting. Take it up if you like. If not, it's up to you. But just let me go through a few points on scripting. There's the other video on the YouTube channel that sort of goes more into depth on building one and showing examples and stuff. But I want to show you a few things to look out for that I know some people, when they try it for the first time, they can kind of have issues with. So first one I want to talk about is pauses. You'll see in a few of my scripts, if we look through them, that I've got them inserted at random places. So Keyboard Maestro, the platform that I use, calls it a pause. If you're on Windows, probably the most dominant platform is AutoHotkey, that calls it a sleep. And there's different terminology for them sort of on the different scripting platforms. But the idea is that you're just telling it to pause and wait for a second before continuing on with the rest of the script. Now, there are different types of pauses. We can have pause and set it for a specific time. We can say pause until a specific thing happens. So, like, say you've told a program to quit, and then you're going to continue with the rest of the script. You can say to wait until that program has finished quitting before you continue on. That's definitely a good one to do. Pause until change, like you could tell it to pause until an application changes state. So say I've set Avid to be exporting something, and then once it finishes, I want it to do a certain script action. I can say pause until Avid becomes responsive, because it'll be non-responsive during the export. And this is just a really good way to keep your script running, particularly if you're on an older machine. I've noticed this a lot if I'm in facilities or if I'm in, really using sort of anyone else's computer. It's hard to demo on this one because this is my new machine. It's got 96 gigs of RAM, and so it doesn't really ever become an issue. But if you're ever using an Avid in a facility and you're trying to run your scripts, or if you're using someone else's Avid briefly, anyone where it's not the most high spec machine, then scripting, particularly if it's a long script, lots of actions, add in pauses every now and again. Particularly if you're changing windows, if you're changing applications, if you're just running a few commands on the timeline, you're probably going to be fine. But say you're running a few commands on the timeline, then you're opening the effect editor, like you're opening a different tool, then I would add a pause. Here's a good example. VFX IDs. So what this particular script is going to do, I think I have demonstrated it in one of the AE200 videos, is it's going to take the VFX ID from a marker, copy it, close the marker window, open the subcap tool, paste it into there, close it, and then move to the next shot. So let me run through the commands that I've got in here. So D is my keystroke that I've got mapped to add a yellow marker, which is what I use for VFX. So if I've already got the marker there, then hitting it again is going to open up the add marker window. And then I've got pause for 0.5 seconds. So this is a pause to give it time to open up that window. Because even if you've got a super fast machine, sometimes Avid might be a bit sluggish. Maybe you've got multiple apps open. Never know. So a pause there. I've got Command A to select all, Command C to copy, and then Enter will close that marker window. Since we're changing windows again, another half-second pause. Then I've got 4, which is my keystroke to open the effect editor. And there will already be a subcap layer there. If you've watched the VFX videos that I've done, that'll be there and waiting. So that's going to open the subcap window. Another half-second pause for subcap to open. Then I'm going to go Command A to select all, Command V to paste. Now, the reason why I've got Command A here is just in case you've ran this once and it didn't quite run right, or you've already done some of this manually, there might be something in the subcap tool already. Say you've redone the VFX IDs, you've simplified the naming of them, which I did do during A200 videos. And so you need to run the script again. If you just have it to open subcap and paste, it's just going to add it to the end. So I just always have the Command A there, so it's going to clear whatever's there already. If there's nothing there, it doesn't matter. And then paste in the new one. And then I've got Command W, which will close that window. And then another half-second pause, and then 6. And 6 for me is my keystroke to jump to next marker. So then it'll just jump to the next instance, ready to do the next one. So let me show you a demonstration of this in action. So here I am parked on a marker, and I'll make this a bit bigger so you can see. And there it is, my VFX ID, TR10, treasure 10, yeah, control 2. Then it's going to run all the commands we just ran through. And then it jumps to the next one. So now you can see if I hover over that, the subcap's got it there. There's my VFX ID burned in. And you can see it didn't have any hiccups there. It paused at just the right times. And even though it had added in several pauses, that still seemed like it ran pretty quick. So don't be afraid to whack in pauses or sleeps or whatever, a bunch of them throughout if it's going to make your script run a bit better. Right, tip number 2, loops. So loops or repeats is when if you have a sequence of commands or even one command that you just want to repeat a bunch of times. So say, for example, the one that I just demoed there, we want that to run and just do all the VFX shots. I don't want to have to just hit the hotkey every time on each individual shot. That might not necessarily save me that much time. So what if I can just script it to just go through and do the whole timeline at once? Well, I have, and it's there, and I'm pretty sure it works. And this is called a loop. So the only thing that I've changed about this is all of the actions from my previous one, VFX IDs, I've put inside a container here, inside a repeat container. So it's just going to repeat all of those. And at the very start, I've added this message box that will pop up. And it'll say, how many shots are there? And then I'll type in the number of shots, and then it will repeat those actions that many times. So let me quickly mock up a timeline to demo this, and then I'll show you.
A wee minute later.
Right, so here I've got a timeline with 5 visual effects shots. So I'm going to run my script that's going to do all 5 of these shots and copy the marker name into the subcap name. Control Shift. So as soon as I trigger it, it's come up on my other monitor, but I get this pop-up box saying how many shots are there. So I'm going to say 5. And you can see it working away, jumping to each one and copying the marker info into the subcap tool. And that only took a matter of a few seconds, and now I've got my VFX IDs in my subcap. Awesome. Now, the thing to look out for with these loops is that quite often, as soon as you start entering loops, you're going to need more pauses because it can build up in the RAM of the machine how many commands that you're running, particularly if you're running through a very long timeline. Say if you had not 5 shots, but you had 200, 300, 400 shots. Now, if you have a very modern and stable machine, it might not be such of a problem, but you're going to want to make sure that you do have pauses spaced throughout. That's why I have them, even though my machine probably doesn't necessarily need it. That's why I've got it for when it opens the effect editor, for when it opens the marker window, for when you're changing between windows, and at the end of a task as well. I've got a pause at the end of a loop, so before it starts doing the task again, another little pause, just because loops can really sort of eat into RAM and can cause the whole thing to fall apart. And unless you've built in a hotkey to cancel the macro, cancel the loop, then it can just start firing keystrokes left, right, and center in places where you really don't want them. You can lose data doing this if it ends up on a different window, like say in a bin or on a timeline when you want it to be on a composer window, for example, and then it's firing all these keystrokes everywhere. That can be an issue. So definitely don't ever start with a loop. You should perfect it in a single instance first, and then once you've got that to work reliably a few times, then introduce a loop, and then only then try it like say 3 or 4 or 5 instances at a time first. And once you're feeling more confident about it, then move the loop into sort of larger scale what you're actually needing it for. Now, a lot of my macros that I've got here, I've got different categories of them. I've had time to finesse these and practice them and tweak them. So across the different projects, they have changed, and they're fairly reliable now because I take them on different jobs. So I try to have them scripted so that they're relatively universal and they can work on different machines, and you don't need a lot of RAM or processor power. So yeah, that's definitely tip number 2, is to make sure that you've got it perfected in one instance first and have plenty of pauses in there whenever you're using loops. Right, now tip number 3 is to do with mouse clicks. Now, you can create actions to mimic a mouse click. You can click at a specific found image, so you could do a screen cap of your screen, and then you can tell it to look for that image and click there when I tell you to, or to specific coordinates on your monitor, or coordinates on a window. Given all kinds of different circumstances, you can get quite specific, which does help. But still, I always find scripting mouse clicks to be quite finicky. They're not the most reliable. They can get confused, and if the rest of your script is contingent on this mouse click being correct, then it can cause you all kinds of problems. So while I do use them at times, I will only ever script in a mouse click when I have absolutely no other choice. I will look for keystrokes that can do the same thing. So a good example of this is a feature that was added in Avid 2022.10, and I did demonstrate it in one of my videos, where if I hold the command key, or control if you're on Windows, and go up or down, I can tab between all of the current panels that I have activated in Media Composer. So that's a good way to get between the timeline and the bin if your script requires it. Say you have to jump to the bin in order to select a different sequence, and then jump to the timeline. This would be the way to do it, rather than enabling mouse clicks. Mouse clicks are only if you categorically have to. Keyboard Maestro and all the other scripting platforms will have ways for you to switch between applications, like direct commands to do that, as well as activate a specific window. You can always use, Command Tab to switch between different windows, and to move from one place to another. And every app as well will have its own keyboard shortcuts. So if I want to bring up a Finder window, I can just tab to Finder, and then I can do Command N, and I can have shortcuts enabled to go to specific folders and things like that. So absolutely anything to avoid a mouse click. They are finicky. They require the last command being loaded in a good amount of time for the click to be able to respond. What I mean by that is if I've done a command to bring up a Finder window, and then the next command is a mouse click to take me to this folder, then it's unless depending on the pause that you've got scheduled in there, this window has to have popped up immediately. Otherwise, it's going to click before that position's there. Then you could have it to pause and wait until this window shows up, but still, just trust me. Unless you absolutely have to, try to avoid a mouse click. Now, another thing to avoid that is probably the most tempting thing to do if you're just getting into scripting, since there's apps on both Mac and Windows that will allow you to do this, is recording actions. And what I mean by this is where basically you can set an application to record, and then you can type a few keystrokes and then stop recording, and then it'll remember those keystrokes. It's a very quick and easy way to make a macro, and then you can run it from there. I find this to be quite unreliable and kind of dodgy. Like, it doesn't necessarily pick up the keystrokes that you've done exactly. And even if it did, the timing in between them, it's not going to add pauses for you. It's kind of a quick and nasty way to make macros that's not very reliable. If you're going to make a macro, I recommend you sit and think it out as to what you need, and then write down, if you need to, or do it here, the actual keystrokes, the actual keys that you're using, the actual functions that you need. You'll see the majority of mine are just keystrokes. You know, some of them get quite complex, but they are majority just keystrokes. I do have ones that are, giving me pop-ups and asking for data, and ones that are switching between apps. So there's a command to activate a specific app. It's not all just keystrokes. But yeah, I will always sort of think of what I need and then try and write it down and try and simplify it in your head as to what exactly you need it to do, and then think of the commands to get to that in the most efficient way possible, and then add them in the list here. Whether that's, again, with AutoHotkey where you're typing them out, or if you're doing it on Keyboard with Maestro, it's just better to add these tasks in one at a time. Now, I've got a folder here. This was a film that I worked on called Borderland, where I needed a bunch of specific stuff done, to the point where it got its own folder. And I tend to make macros as the need arises for stuff, and I don't always keep them because they tend to be quite specific per project. But if there's any sort of task that's a bit mundane or something that's getting a bit too repetitive, I'll just work one up here quickly and then just run that whenever I need to. So, for example, I think this is when I was doing turnovers, and I had created a whole bunch of timelines because we had divided the film into 5 reels, and then I was running the script to add specific suffixes to specific sequences. Now, we can't do that nowadays with bulk edit within Media Composer, but I've been doing this for many years, and sometimes I forget bulk edit is there. It's a really amazing feature in Avid, but I still sometimes forget that it's there. Here's another example of one that's a bit different. There's no keystrokes involved in this at all. I have ones when I was working at a company called Axis. I had 2 macros called clock in and clock out, and I had 2 buttons just on my Stream Deck for this. And so clock in, when at the beginning of the day I would hit this button, it would activate the apps that I needed for this job. Activated Slack, Mail, Google Chrome, which I don't normally use as a browser, but I like to have all my tabs for that job because we had to have a lot of tabs open for that job. And so having a browser specifically just for that job helped. So Chrome, PCIe IP, so Teradici, my remoting in client. And then Mass Effect is my favorite game ever, so I had it play a little, welcome message after it had done its tasks. And then clock out was the same again. It would quit those apps and then play a little sound, So yeah, that's kind of my summary of a few tips for you guys for scripting for today. It's definitely a really, really useful skill set to have, scripting, I'd say particularly in post, because we have all sorts of tasks ranging from the very creative to the very mundane, and this can just save us a lot of time. And when you show it to producers and even some editors who have never seen it before, they think it's just magic, and it can score you a lot of brownie points with them. If any of you try this and you're having trouble with the scripting, feel free to send me a message on Patreon. You will notice that sometimes I might take a little bit to reply on the Patreon. It's because I'm having trouble with it giving me notifications. I think I've seen some of you have issues with that as well. I might need to send an email to them and ask them about that. It doesn't always notify me when there's a message, either on the app or, via email like it's supposed to. So it won't be until the next time that I log in that I necessarily see the message. And I'm sure this is happening for some of you guys as well, because I'll log in, see your message, reply, and then it might not be for a few weeks before you then reply. So don't worry, I do check it semi-regularly, and I will get back to you whenever I can. And if any of you guys are trying to come up with macros and you're struggling, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to help. If you are a Mac user, I'd highly recommend Keyboard Maestro, and I can mock up some scripts and send them to you, and we can email them back and forth, no problem. But if you're on Windows, the sort of most reliable platform that I can recommend is AutoHotkey. It is a bit more of a learning curve. There's some videos that I'll put in the post along with this video that sort of go through it in depth on YouTube, and that's sort of where I learned, between that and a friend of mine who's in post, about the same time as me, and but he's predominantly a Windows user, and so he uses AutoHotkey, and so he showed me some things. But yeah, I'll do my best to help regardless. So just give me a shout. Until then, guys, I will see you in the next video. I'm going to try and get another couple up on the actual YouTube channel lately. I really need to get back into it. It's just not really had the time. Been 2 months away from my family as well, so I'm putting in some good FaceTime with them. But yes, I will get more content up very, very soon. And until then, take it easy, guys, and just holler at me if you've got any questions or concerns or anything I can help with. See ya.